Some secrets are buried so deep that only innocent hands can dig them up. The discovery came on a Tuesday morning when Park Ranger Mike Chen found two small figures huddled beneath a massive cedar in the North Cascades, their breath visible in the sub-zero air, yet their skin warm to the touch. The Arokat brothers, named after the native word carved into a nearby tree, should have been dead from exposure after 3 days of brutal winter storms. Dr. Elena Vasquez had seen plenty of impossible cases in her 20-year career as a forensic geneticist, but nothing prepared her for the blood samples that arrived at her Seattle lab. The boys' DNA contained genetic markers that didn't exist in any human database, sequences that seemed to pulse with an otherworldly logic. Their cells regenerated at impossible speeds, their neural pathways fired in patterns that defied medical understanding, and their blood carried antibodies for diseases that had never been documented on Earth. As Elena dug deeper into classified government files, she uncovered decades of similar cases, wild children with impossible abilities, all buried under layers of bureaucratic silence. The question that haunted her wasn't where these children came from, but what their existence meant for the rest of humanity. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Elena's hands trembled as she closed the classified file on her computer screen, the cursor blinking accusingly in the sudden darkness of her lab. 3 a.m. again. The coffee in her mug had long since grown cold, forming a bitter film that reminded her of the taste of sleepless nights she'd grown accustomed to since losing Maya. The Harborview Medical Center's genetics lab hummed with the white noise of refrigeration units and air filtration systems, a mechanical lullaby that had become more familiar than her own heartbeat. Elena pushed back from her workstation, her reflection ghosting across the black monitor, hollow cheeks, silver threading through dark hair she'd forgotten to trim, eyes that had seen too much and believed too little until today. The blood samples sat in their centrifuge tubes across the room, innocuous red liquid that had shattered everything she thought she knew about human biology. She'd run the test 17 times. Each result came back identical, impossible, undeniable. Her phone buzzed against the lab bench. A text from her sister Carmen. "Missed you at dinner again. Mom's worried. Call me." Elena deleted it without responding. How could she explain that she'd found something that might rewrite the textbooks, when she couldn't even explain why she'd let her own daughter's genetic code slip through her fingers like sand? Maya's rare Hutchinson-Gilford progeria syndrome had aged her 8 years in the span of 2, turning Elena's brilliant, laughing daughter into a wizened ghost before the cancer took her completely. The irony wasn't lost on her. Here she sat, staring at blood samples from children who healed impossibly fast, while her own child had died from cells that aged impossibly quickly. The lab door's magnetic lock disengaged with a soft click. Dr. James Morrison, her research partner, stepped inside carrying 2 steaming cups from the all-night cafe downstairs. "Figured you'd still be here," he said, setting 1 cup beside her keyboard. "Elena, you've been at this for 36 hours straight. The boys are stable upstairs. Whatever answers you're looking for, they'll still be there after you get some sleep." She accepted the coffee gratefully, wrapping her fingers around the warmth. "James, look at this protein sequence." She pulled up the genetic analysis on her screen. "These aren't random mutations. They're organized, intentional, like someone designed them." He leaned over her shoulder, squinting at the data. At 62, James had the steady demeanor of a man who'd spent decades in forensics, unflappable even when faced with the bizarre cases that found their way to their lab. But Elena watched his expression shift from tired patience to sharp attention. "That's impossible," he murmured. "Those base pairs, they don't exist in nature." "That's what I thought. But I've triple-checked the sequencing. James, these children aren't just genetically unusual. They're genetically impossible." Through the lab's interior window, she could see into the hospital corridor where night shift nurses moved like ghosts between rooms. Somewhere upstairs, the Arokat brothers slept under observation, their vital signs steady as metronomes despite everything they'd endured. The younger boy, David, had arrived with frostbite that vanished overnight. The older one, Marcus, had shown clear signs of malnutrition that reversed itself within hours of 4 fluids. "Have you contacted CDC?" James asked. Elena shook her head. "Not yet. I wanted to be sure." She paused, then added quietly, "I also pulled some archived files from the federal database. Similar cases going back 50 years, all classified above our clearance level." The silence stretched between them, filled only by the lab's mechanical breathing. "Elena," James said carefully, "if you're right about this, if these children represent some kind of, what, new human subspecies? Genetic experiment? The implications—" "I know." She pulled up another file. 1987, Oregon. Twin girls found living in a cave system, immune to radiation exposure from a nearby military test site. 1994, Alaska. A boy discovered in a crashed aircraft, surviving temperatures that should have killed him in minutes. 2003, Montana. 3 children who spoke in mathematical sequences instead of words. James sank into a chair beside her. All classified? All disappeared into federal custody within days of discovery. No follow-up reports, no medical studies released to the scientific community. Nothing. A new email notification popped up on her screen. The sender line made her blood freeze. Office of Strategic Services, Genetic Analysis Division. "Dr. Vasquez," the message read, "we understand you're conducting analysis on the subjects recovered from the North Cascades. Please prepare all materials for immediate transfer to federal custody. A collection team will arrive at 0800. Your cooperation in this matter of national security is appreciated." Elena stared at the message, her coffee growing cold again in her hands. 8 hours. In 8 hours, the Arokat brothers would vanish into the same bureaucratic void that had swallowed decades of similar cases, unless she chose to dig deeper into secrets that someone very powerful wanted to keep buried. Her daughter's voice echoed in her memory. "Mama, why do people get sick?" Maybe it was time to find out why some people didn't. Elena's fingers hovered over the keyboard, the cursor blinking like a heartbeat in the silence that followed James's reading of the federal email. The weight of 8 hours pressed against her chest, 8 hours before the Arokat brothers disappeared into the same void that had swallowed decades of impossible children. "We could copy the files," James said quietly, his voice barely audible above the lab's mechanical hum. "Back everything up to an external drive before they arrive." She turned to study his face in the monitor's blue glow. In their 12 years of partnership, James had never suggested anything that skirted protocol. He was the steady one, the voice of reason when her passion for genetic mysteries threatened to overwhelm scientific objectivity. That he was willing to risk their careers meant he understood what they were facing. "They'll know," Elena said. "The moment we access those classified files again, someone will be alerted. We're probably already being monitored." She gestured toward the security camera mounted in the corner, its red recording light a constant reminder of how little privacy existed in their world of federal grants and oversight committees. James followed her gaze, then looked back at her screen where the genetic sequences still displayed their impossible patterns. "Elena, in all our years working together, I've never seen you back down from a scientific puzzle. Remember the Hendricks case? You spent 3 months proving that cancer cluster was linked to contaminated groundwater, even when the EPA tried to shut down your research. The memory surfaced unbidden. Long nights similar to this one, fighting bureaucracy to expose a truth that ultimately saved hundreds of lives. But that had been different. That had been normal human genetics, normal human disease. This felt like standing at the edge of an abyss that might swallow not just her career, but her understanding of reality itself. "That was before Maya," she said softly. The words hung between them like a confession. Before her daughter's death, Elena had been fearless in pursuit of genetic mysteries. She'd built her reputation on cases other scientists wouldn't touch, on finding patterns in the impossible, but losing Maya had taught her that some battles couldn't be won through pure determination and scientific method. Some genetic puzzles had no solutions, only heartbreak. James reached across the space between their chairs and squeezed her shoulder. Maya would want you to help these boys. Elena's throat tightened. Maya would be 14 now if the progeria hadn't stolen her future one accelerated day at a time. Old enough to understand the weight of choosing between safety and truth. Old enough to make the choice Elena now faced. Her phone buzzed again. Another text from Carmen. Elena, please. Mom made your favorite tamales. She's convinced you're wasting away in that lab. The normalcy of the message felt surreal against the backdrop of impossible genetic codes and federal threats. Her mother's kitchen, warm with the scent of masa and careful love. Carmen's children, Elena's nephews, growing up healthy and normal, their DNA following predictable patterns that required no explanation beyond basic biology textbooks. She had a life outside these lab walls. Tenure track at the University of Washington, a mortgage on a small house in Fremont where Maya's room remained exactly as she'd left it. Sunday dinners with family who worried about her sleeping habits and whether she was eating enough vegetables. Professional relationships built over decades of careful, methodical research that never challenged fundamental assumptions about human nature. All of it felt fragile now, balanced on the knife's edge of her next decision. What if they're right to classify this? She asked, voicing the fear that had been growing since she first saw those impossible protein sequences. What if some knowledge is too dangerous? What if exposing this destroys more than it saves? James was quiet for a long moment, studying the genetic data with the patience of a man who'd spent his career examining evidence others missed. "Do you remember why you became a geneticist?" he finally asked. She did. A high school biology class where she'd first seen DNA's elegant double helix, first understood that life's deepest mysteries were written in a four-letter alphabet waiting to be decoded. The romance of it had called to something fundamental in her nature, the need to understand, to push beyond the comfortable boundaries of known science. "Because I wanted to read the book of life," she said. "And now you've found a chapter written in a language that supposedly doesn't exist. Elena, you can choose safety, go home, pretend this never happened. Let someone else carry this burden." He gestured toward the email still glowing on her screen. "Or you can remember that science advances one dangerous discovery at a time." Through the lab's window, she watched the first hint of dawn touching the Seattle skyline. In 3 hours, the collection team would arrive. The Arokat brothers would disappear into federal custody, their impossible biology classified beyond her reach. Unless she chose to make copies first, Elena's hand moved toward the keyboard, hovering over keys that could change everything. Elena's fingers touched the keys, and the decision crystallized like ice forming on glass. She began typing, her movements deliberate despite the tremor in her hands. The external drive hummed to life as terabytes of impossible data began transferring, genetic sequences that rewrote the rules of terrestrial biology, protein structures that shouldn't exist, DNA base pairs that belonged in science fiction rather than peer-reviewed journals. Elena James's voice carried a warning she'd never heard before. She looked up to see him staring past her toward the lab's main entrance. Through the reinforced glass door, 3 figures in dark suits stood in the hospital corridor, their faces impassive as they spoke to someone on a secure phone. Too early. They were 3 hours too early. Her heart hammered against her ribs as she watched the lead agent, a woman with steel grey hair and the bearing of military training, end her call and approach the door. The magnetic lock disengaged with a soft click that sounded like a gunshot in the lab's silence. "Dr. Elena Vasquez?" The woman's voice carried authority that made Elena's academic credentials feel suddenly insignificant. "Agent Sarah Chen, Office of Strategic Services. We're here to collect all materials related to the North Cascade subjects." Elena's finger hovered over the delete key, the external drive still copying behind her. "You're early." The email said 8 o'clock. Plans changed. Agent Chen stepped into the lab, her companions flanking the doorway like sentinels. "Please step away from the computer, Doctor." The transfer bar on Elena's screen showed 67% complete. She needed more time, but Chen's eyes missed nothing as they swept the lab, cataloging equipment, noting the positioning of monitors, assessing threats with the efficiency of someone trained to see what others preferred to hide. "I'm still conducting analysis," Elena said, surprised by the steadiness in her own voice. "Surely you understand the importance of thorough documentation before—" "What I understand," Chen interrupted, "is that you've accessed classified materials above your clearance level. Dr. Morrison, please collect any physical samples and prepare them for transport." James moved with careful deliberation toward the centrifuge, where the blood samples waited, his academic calm intact despite the situation's sudden escalation. Elena recognized the performance. They'd worked together long enough to communicate without words. He was buying her time. 74%. "Agent Chen," Elena said, turning in her chair to face the federal agent directly, "these children need proper medical care. Whatever they are, wherever they came from, they're still just boys. The younger one asked for his mother yesterday, in a language I don't recognize, but the meaning was clear." Something flickered across Chen's expression, so brief Elena almost missed it. Recognition? Regret? The agent's professional mask reformed instantly, but Elena had spent too many years reading the subtle tells of genetic probability to miss the significance of that moment. "You've seen this before," Elena continued, emboldened by her observation, "not just in the archived files. You've seen children like David and Marcus. Dr. Vasquez, your cooperation will be noted in our report. Your resistance will also be noted." Chen moved closer, her voice dropping to barely above a whisper. "There are things you don't understand, larger implications that extend far beyond two children in a Seattle hospital." 81%. Elena's phone buzzed against the lab bench, a text message, but not from Carmen this time. The sender was listed as unknown, the message consisting of coordinates and a single line, the others awaiting. Her blood turned to ice. She looked up to find Chen watching her with hawk-like intensity. "Dr. Vasquez, are you receiving communications from unknown sources?" The question felt like a trap, but Elena's scientific training demanded honesty even in the face of personal danger. "Someone just sent me coordinates. I don't know who." Chen extended her hand. "Your phone, please." Elena hesitated, her mind racing through possibilities. The message could be a coincidence, a wrong number, spam, but the timing felt too precise, the phrasing too specific. The others are waiting, others like David and Marcus, others like the children from the archived files. 89%. Dr. Chen's patience was wearing thin. Elena handed over her phone, watching as Chen's expression darkened while reading the message. The agent stepped away, speaking rapidly into her own device in words too quiet to overhear. James caught Elena's eye from across the lab, his slight nod indicating the blood samples were secure. Whatever happened next, they'd preserved something of the Arokat brothers' mystery. 96%. Agent Chen returned. Her demeanor shifted from professional courtesy to barely contained urgency. "Dr. Vasquez, I need you to answer very carefully. Have you shared your findings with anyone outside this lab?" The question hung in the air like smoke. Elena realized that her next words would determine not just her own fate, but possibly the fate of everyone she cared about. Through the lab window, dawn painted the Seattle skyline in shades of gold and shadow, the ordinary world continuing its rotation, while Elena stood at the fulcrum of something that might change everything. The transfer completed with a soft chime. Elena's mouth went dry. The soft chime of the completed transfer seemed to echo in the sudden silence, though she knew only she could hear its significance. Behind her, the external drive held secrets that could reshape humanity's understanding of itself, or destroy her life completely. "Have you shared your findings with anyone outside this lab?" Chen's question, demanded an answer that Elena wasn't prepared to give. The truth was complicated. She'd accessed the classified files, yes, but sharing implied intent, collaboration, conspiracy. The mysterious coordinates burning in Chen's hand suggested someone already knew about her research, someone who'd been watching, waiting. But who? Elena began, then stopped. The weight of her daughter's memory pressed against her chest like a physical force. Maya's final weeks replayed in fractured images, the hospital bed that dwarfed her shrinking frame, the genetic counselors who spoke in careful euphemisms about quality of life. The moment Elena realized all her expertise in human genetics meant nothing against a disease that aged cells beyond their natural limits. She'd failed Maya, failed to find answers when they mattered most. Dr. Vasquez. Chen's voice carried a warning. No, Elena said, the word emerging stronger than she felt. I haven't shared anything. It wasn't entirely a lie. She'd accessed files, copied data, but sharing implied trust, and Elena trusted no one with this knowledge, not yet. Not when she didn't understand what it meant or who else might be hunting for the same answers. Chen studied her face with the intensity of someone trained to detect deception. Elena forced herself to maintain eye contact, drawing on years of defending research proposals to hostile review boards. But this felt different. The stakes weren't tenure or grant funding now. The children upstairs, Elena continued, surprising herself with her boldness. David and Marcus, what happens to them when you take them? That's classified. They're 8 and 12 years old. They've been living wild in the mountains for God knows how long. Whatever they are, wherever they came from, they need... What they need, Chen interrupted, is protection from people who would exploit their condition, people who would turn them into lab rats or media spectacles or weapons. Weapons. The word hit Elena like cold water. She thought of David's impossible healing, Marcus's apparent immunity to hypothermia. In the wrong hands, genetic anomalies became genetic advantages, became tools. Is that what this is about? Elena asked. Their potential military applications? Chen's expression didn't change, but Elena caught the slight tension in her shoulders. Another tell, another crack in the professional facade. Behind them, James continued his methodical collection of blood samples, moving with deliberate slowness. Elena recognized the performance. He was still buying time, though for what, she no longer knew. The data was copied, the evidence preserved. But preservation meant nothing if she lacked the courage to act on it. Her phone buzzed again in Chen's hand. The agent's eyes narrowed as she read whatever new message had arrived. Dr. Vasquez, I need you to listen very carefully. Chen's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. There are people who believe the Arokat brothers represent an opportunity, others who see them as a threat. My job is to ensure they're protected from both perspectives until we better understand what we're dealing with. Protected or contained. Sometimes there's no difference. Elena thought of Maya again, of the genetic counselor who'd explained progeria with the same careful neutrality Chen now displayed. Clinical distance in the face of human suffering, the reduction of children to data points, case studies, manageable problems with bureaucratic solutions. What if the boys don't want protection? Elena asked. What if they want to go home, back to the woods? Home to what? Chen's mask slipped slightly, revealing something that might have been genuine concern. Dr. Vasquez, we found evidence of their campsite. They've been surviving in conditions that should have killed them. No shelter, no reliable food source, no human contact. Whatever kept them alive out there, it wasn't natural. The words hung between them like smoke. Not natural. Elena's scientific training rebelled against the phrase. Everything in nature followed rules, patterns, evolutionary logic. But the genetic sequences on her computer defied every pattern she understood. The coordinates in that message, Chen continued. Do you have any idea who might have sent them? Elena shook her head, though unease crawled up her spine. Someone knew about her research. Someone was watching, waiting, coordinating. The thought of unknown eyes tracking her work felt like a violation, but also like validation. If others were interested in the Arokat brothers, if there truly were coordinates pointing toward others, then maybe Elena wasn't losing her scientific mind. Maybe the impossible was simply undiscovered. "I want to see them," Elena said suddenly. "The boys. Before you take them," Chen checked her watch. "Dr. Vasquez, 5 minutes, please. As the physician who documented their condition, I have a right to ensure their medical needs are being met." It was a thin excuse, but Elena could see Chen weighing risks, calculating the cost of 5 minutes against the value of Elena's continued cooperation. The external drive felt heavy in her pocket, carrying secrets that might change everything. Chen's shoulders sagged almost imperceptibly, the gesture so brief, Elena wondered if she'd imagined it. "5 minutes," the agent said finally. "But one of my people accompanies you." Elena nodded, her heart hammering as she stood. The external drive in her pocket felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds, its presence a constant reminder that she'd already crossed one line. Now she was about to cross another. The elevator ride to the pediatric ward passed in tense silence. Agent Chen's colleague, a younger man with the rigid posture of military training, stood behind Elena like a shadow. Through the elevator's small window, Seattle's morning traffic began its familiar dance, ordinary people heading to ordinary jobs, their lives untouched by the impossibility of what waited 3 floors above. The pediatric ward smelled of antiseptic, and that particular brand of forced cheerfulness hospitals used to mask suffering. Cartoon characters smiled from wall murals, their bright colors a stark contrast to the gray reality of sick children and worried parents. Elena had spent too many hours in similar hallways during Maya's final months, learning to navigate the careful choreography of hope and despair that defined these places. "Room 314, Chen said, stopping before a door marked with biohazard warnings and restricted access signs. "Remember, Dr. Vasquez, 5 minutes." Elena's hand trembled as she pushed open the door. The Arokat brothers sat on adjacent beds, their impossible presence somehow smaller and more human in the sterile hospital environment. David, the younger one, clutched a stuffed animal someone had given him, a brown bear that looked absurdly normal against his pale, otherworldly features. Marcus watched the door with eyes that held too much knowledge for his 12 years. "Hello," Elena said softly, stepping into the room. "Do you remember me, Dr. Vasquez?" Marcus tilted his head, studying her face with an intensity that made Elena's skin prickle. When he spoke, it was in that musical language she couldn't identify, words that flowed like water over stone, but something in his tone suggested recognition, perhaps even relief. David looked up from his bear and smiled, an expression so purely childlike it made Elena's chest ache. Whatever else these boys might be, they were still children, still capable of trust and wonder, and the kind of innocent joy that hospital rooms too often destroyed. Elena moved closer, her medical training automatically noting their condition. The wounds from their rescue had vanished completely, leaving no trace of scars or healing. Their skin held a subtle luminescence that fluorescent lighting couldn't explain, and their eyes, those impossible amber eyes, tracked movement with predatory precision, even as their faces remained open and curious. "I know you can't understand me," Elena said, crouching down to David's eye level. "But I need you to know that some people want to help you, and some people—" She glanced toward Chen's colleague standing in the doorway. "Some people might not understand what help means." Marcus spoke again, his voice carrying urgency. He pointed toward the window, then back to Elena, his meaning unmistakable even across the language barrier. He wanted out. They both did. Elena's phone, now back in her possession after Chen's inspection, buzzed against her hip. Another message from the unknown sender, North Parking Garage. Level 3. "Come alone." Her blood turned to ice. Someone was here now, waiting for her. Someone who knew about the boys, about her research, about the impossible choice she faced. Dr. Vasquez Chen appeared in the doorway. Time's up. Elena stood slowly, her mind racing. The coordinates from the earlier message remained unexplained. The archived files suggested a pattern spanning decades. And now someone wanted to meet her, alone, in a parking garage where security cameras had convenient blind spots. She looked at David and Marcus one last time. David had returned to his bear, but Marcus watched her with an expression that might have been understanding or warning. "What happens now?" Elena asked as they walked back toward the elevator. "Now they come with us," Chen said, "and you go back to your lab, finish your report, and forget you ever met the Arokat brothers." The elevator doors slid shut with mechanical finality. Elena watched the floor numbers descend, 543, each digit marking her return to ordinary reality. But the external drive in her pocket thrummed with impossible data, and the mysterious message burned in her phone's memory like a dare. At the ground floor, Chen stepped out first, scanning the hospital lobby with professional paranoia. "Dr. Vasquez, I trust we understand each other." Elena nodded, but her feet didn't move toward the exit. The parking garage waited 3 levels down, along with answers that might destroy everything she thought she knew about human evolution, about her daughter's death, about the nature of reality itself. "Agent Chen," she said, surprising herself with the steadiness in her voice. "What if they're not the only ones?" Chen paused in the lobby's entrance, her reflection ghost-like in the glass doors. "Then God help us all." Elena watched the federal agents disappear into the Seattle morning, taking their secrets and their fears with them. The hospital hummed with ordinary life around her, nurses changing shifts, families gathering in waiting rooms, the eternal dance of healing and hope that had defined her professional world for 2 decades. But she was no longer part of that world. The external drive in her pocket had made her something else, a guardian of impossible knowledge, standing at the threshold of a truth that might reshape humanity's understanding of itself. Her feet carried her toward the stairwell that led down to the parking garage. There was no going back now. The parking garage's fluorescent lights cast harsh shadows between concrete pillars, creating a maze of light and darkness that made every footstep echo like a gunshot. Elena's breath formed small clouds in the February air as she descended to level 3, her scientific mind cataloging details while her body prepared for fight or flight. The message had said to come alone, but Elena spotted the figure waiting beside her Toyota Camry before she'd taken 10 steps into the garage. A woman, mid-40s, wearing a nondescript navy coat that suggested either careful anonymity or government training. Elena's stomach clenched as she recognized the same predatory awareness that had marked Agent Chen. "Dr. Vasquez." The woman stepped into the light, revealing sharp features and prematurely gray hair pulled back in a severe bun. "Thank you for coming." "Who are you?" Elena's voice echoed off the concrete walls, sounding smaller than she'd intended. "Dr. Sarah Martinez. I was like you once, a geneticist who stumbled onto something that wasn't supposed to exist." Martinez held up her hands as Elena tensed. "I'm not government, not anymore. I'm part of a group that's been tracking cases like the Arokat brothers for 15 years. Elena's scientific skepticism warred with desperate hope. "Cases? How many cases?" 43 documented instances since 2008. Children found in impossible circumstances, displaying abilities that defy current understanding of human biology. "And Dr. Vasquez," Martinez stepped closer, her voice dropping to barely above a whisper. "We think we know where they're coming from." The external drive seemed to burn against Elena's leg through her pocket. Around them, the garage's normal sounds, car engines, footsteps, elevator chimes, felt surreal, like the soundtrack to someone else's life. Elena thought of David's healing wounds, Marcus's amber eyes, the genetic sequences that contained base pairs unknown to terrestrial biology. "The government knows," Elena said. "It wasn't a question. Some parts of it. There's a task force, officially called Environmental Adaptation Studies, that's been collecting these children for decades. Agent Chen works for them, though she might not know the full scope of the program. Martinez pulled out a tablet, its screen showing a map dotted with red markers. These are the documented locations where children like David and Marcus have been found. Notice a pattern? Elena studied the map, her geneticist's training automatically seeking correlations. The markers formed rough clusters around mountain ranges, the Cascades, the Rockies, the Appalachians. But there was something else, a geometric precision that suggested intention rather than random distribution. "They're not random," Elena murmured. "No, they're not. And Dr. Vasquez, we think your research might hold the key to understanding why." Martinez scrolled to another screen, showing genetic sequences that made Elena's breath catch. They matched the anomalies she'd found in the Arokat brothers' DNA, impossible base pairs, protein structures that shouldn't exist in nature. "You've analyzed others," Elena said. "When we can. The government usually moves too fast, but occasionally we get lucky. Occasionally we find researchers like you who are willing to look beyond the official explanations." Martinez's eyes held the same haunted quality Elena recognized in her own mirror, the look of someone who'd seen too much to ever return to comfortable ignorance. Elena thought of Maya again, of the genetic disease that had aged her daughter's cells beyond their natural limits. What if they're not anomalies? What if they're evolution? Then we need to understand what they're evolving toward, or what they're evolving from. Martinez closed the tablet, her expression grim. "Dr. Vasquez, I need to ask you something, and I need you to think carefully before you answer. Have you noticed any changes in yourself since you've been exposed to the Arokat brothers' genetic material?" The question hit Elena like ice water. She thought of the precision with which she'd navigated the classified files, the clarity of thought that had allowed her to outmaneuver Agent Chen's questioning, the strange certainty that had driven her to this meeting despite every rational instinct screaming danger. "Changes how?" she asked, though part of her already knew. "Enhanced cognitive function, improved reflexes, resistance to fatigue. The genetic anomalies we've identified appear to be transmissible under certain circumstances: close contact with bodily fluids, extended exposure to the subjects themselves." Elena's hands trembled as she remembered drawing the boy's blood samples, the small cuts she'd sustained on the broken glass near David's original bed, the hours she'd spent analyzing their tissue samples without proper containment protocols. Her scientific training should have prevented such carelessness, but she'd been driven by something deeper than caution. "My daughter died of progeria," Elena said suddenly, the words tumbling out before she could stop them. "Accelerated aging caused by genetic defects. I couldn't save her because I didn't understand the mechanisms well enough." "But these children, they don't age normally, do they? They heal too quickly, survive impossible conditions." Martinez nodded slowly. "We think they might be genetically immortal, or close to it. But Dr. Vasquez, immortality comes with a price. We need to understand what that price is before the government decides how to use them." Elena realized she'd already made her choice. The moment she'd copied those files, the moment she'd answered the mysterious message, the moment she'd walked down into this garage, she'd chosen to step through the looking glass into a world where the impossible was simply undiscovered. "What do you need me to do?" Martinez's tablet disappeared into her coat as she glanced toward the garage entrance. "First, we need to get you out of here. Agent Chen's people are thorough, but they're not the only ones watching." She gestured toward a black SUV parked in the shadows. "My team has a safe house 40 minutes north. We can talk more freely there." Elena's scientific mind rebelled against the spy thriller reality her life had suddenly become. "I can't just disappear. I have a lab, responsibilities, patients depending on—" Dr. Vasquez Martinez's voice carried the weight of experience. "How many genetic samples did you process today? How many files did you access? Do you really think Agent Chen bought your performance back there?" The truth settled in Elena's stomach like lead. She'd been clumsy, desperate, driven by grief and impossible hope rather than careful methodology. The external drive in her pocket contained evidence of her theft, and her clumsy questions had probably revealed more than Chen let on. "They'll come for me," Elena said, the words tasting like ash. "They're probably already at your apartment." Martinez checked her watch. "Which gives us maybe 6 hours before they expand the search grid. Enough time to brief you on what we know, what we suspect, and what we need you to help us prove." Elena thought of her empty apartment, her sterile laboratory, the careful routine she'd built to contain her grief over Maya's death. That life already felt like someone else's memory, distant and insubstantial compared to the impossible boys upstairs and the genetic sequences that rewrote everything she understood about human evolution. "The other children you've tracked," Elena said as they walked toward Martinez's vehicle, "are they all like David and Marcus? The same abilities?" "Similar, but not identical. Some heal faster, others show enhanced cognitive function, a few display what can only be called psychic phenomena." Martinez unlocked the SUV with a chirp that echoed off concrete walls, "But they all share certain genetic markers, the same anomalous base pairs you found, the same protein structures that shouldn't exist in terrestrial biology." Elena paused with her hand on the passenger door. "Terrestrial. You keep using that word." Martinez met her eyes across the SUV's roof. "Because we're not sure they are terrestrial. Or we're not sure we are." The drive north took them through Seattle's suburban sprawl and into the foothills of the Cascades, the same mountains where the Arokat brothers had survived impossible conditions for an unknown length of time. Martinez drove with practiced efficiency, while Elena stared out at landscape that now seemed charged with hidden significance. How many other children were out there? How many had been found and disappeared into government facilities? "Tell me about the task force," Elena said, as they wound through increasingly remote roads. "Environmental adaptation studies. Officially, they research human responses to climate change. Unofficially, they're a joint DoD-CIA operation focused on genetic enhancement for military applications." Martinez's knuckles whitened on the steering wheel. "I worked for them for 3 years before I understood what we were really doing." Elena's mind raced through the implications. The children, they're being used as test subjects. Worse, they're being used as templates. The goal is to isolate the genetic factors that grant their abilities and create a reproducible enhancement protocol for military personnel. Martinez's voice carried the flatness of someone reciting horrors. "Imagine soldiers who heal from gunshot wounds in hours, who can survive Arctic conditions without equipment, who process information faster than any computer system. That's not possible. Genetic modification on that scale isn't possible with current technology," Martinez agreed. "But it becomes possible if you have living subjects whose DNA already contains the necessary modifications. If you can figure out how to replicate and transfer those modifications to normal humans." The SUV turned onto a gravel road that disappeared into dense forest. Elena thought of Marcus's eyes, the intelligence and wariness that suggested he understood far more than his apparent age implied. Had he recognized her as another potential captor? Another scientist who saw him as raw material for impossible experiments? "How many children have they taken?" Elena asked. "We've lost track of 18 over the past decade. Collected, studied, and then—" Martinez shrugged helplessly. "They disappear from all records. Even our inside sources can't trace what happens after the initial research phase." Elena's hands clenched in her lap. Maya's face swam in her memory, pale and aged beyond her years, fighting a genetic disease that had stolen her childhood and eventually her life. How many other children were suffering now because of their genetic gifts rather than genetic flaws? "Dr. Martinez," Elena said slowly, "what if we're approaching this backwards? What if these children aren't anomalies to be studied and replicated? What if they're the next step?" Martinez glanced at her with sharp attention. "Explain." "Evolution doesn't stop. It adapts to new challenges, new environmental pressures, climate change, pollution, resource scarcity. Maybe these children represent humanity's adaptation to a changing world. Maybe we're seeing the emergence of Homo superior. Then, what does that make the rest of us?" Elena stared out at the darkening forest, thinking of genetic sequences that contained impossible base pairs of children who survived conditions that should have killed them, of her own enhanced clarity since exposure to their biological material. "Obsolete," she whispered. The word hung in the SUV's cabin like a death sentence. Martinez pulled into a clearing where a modest cabin sat surrounded by towering firs, their branches heavy with snow that gleamed silver in the vehicle's headlights. Elena's hands trembled as she processed the full implications of what she'd just articulated. "If we're obsolete," Martinez said, cutting the engine, "then what happens to the 7 billion people who can't heal bullet wounds or survive hypothermia?" Elena didn't answer. She couldn't. Because deep in her geneticist's soul she understood the brutal mathematics of evolution. Inferior adaptations didn't coexist with superior ones. They were replaced, eliminated, made extinct. Inside the cabin, Martinez's team had transformed the rustic space into a high-tech command center. Laptops lined the dining table, their screens displaying genetic sequences, satellite imagery, and classified documents that made Elena's stolen files look like children's homework. 3 other people looked up as they entered. 2 scientists Elena didn't recognize, and a man whose bearing screamed military intelligence. "Dr. Vasquez," Martinez said, "meet the others who've chosen truth over comfort." Elena barely registered the introductions, her attention fixed on the largest monitor, which displayed a 3-dimensional model of a DNA helix that defied everything she thought she knew about genetic structure. The base pairs weren't just anomalous, they were architectural, forming patterns too complex and precise to be natural mutations. "This is from a 12-year-old girl found in the Appalachians last month," said Dr. Sarah Chen, not Agent Chen, Elena realized with a start, but another scientist entirely. She'd been living alone in a cave system for at least 2 years, surviving on a diet that should have killed her within weeks. Elena studied the genetic model. Her enhanced cognitive abilities, she could no longer deny they existed, processing information at speeds that astounded her. The protein folding patterns, they're not random. Someone designed this. "That's what we think too," Martinez said quietly, "which brings us to the question that's kept us awake for 3 years. Designed by whom?" Elena sank into a chair, the weight of impossible revelation crushing down on her. Through the cabin's windows, she could see the forest where David and Marcus had survived conditions that should have been fatal, where dozens of other children had emerged from wilderness with abilities that transcended human biology. "Show her the timeline," said the military man. Colonel Harrison, Elena remembered. The main screen shifted to display a chart spanning decades. Red dots marked incidents of enhanced children discovered worldwide, but the pattern that emerged made Elena's blood freeze. The incidents weren't random or even clustered. They followed a mathematical progression, increasing in frequency and geographical distribution with algorithmic precision. 1876, Harrison said, pointing to the chart's beginning. First documented case of a wild child displaying impossible survival abilities in the Montana Territory. Military expedition found a 6-year-old boy living alone at 10,000 feet elevation in midwinter, apparently for months. Elena's eyes tracked the progression. 1876, 1894, 1912, 1930. The intervals are decreasing, exponentially. And Dr. Vasquez, if the pattern holds, Martinez highlighted the projected dates. We're looking at hundreds of these children appearing within the next 5 years. Elena's phone buzzed against her leg. Unknown number. Her hands shook as she read the message. Your daughter didn't die from progeria. She was the first failed attempt. The boys are proof we're getting better at integration. The device slipped from Elena's numb fingers, clattering onto the wooden floor. Every person in the room turned to stare at her as she processed words that rewrote not just her understanding of genetics, but her entire personal history. Elena Martinez's voice seemed to come from very far away. What is it? Elena couldn't speak, couldn't breathe. Maya's face floated in her memory. Not the diseased child she'd mourned, but a failed experiment. A prototype. The first attempt at creating something beyond human limitations, before whoever was behind this perfected their methodology. "They killed my daughter," she whispered. The room erupted in questions, concerned voices, demands for explanation. But Elena heard none of it, because the enhanced cognitive abilities that had seemed like a gift were now revealing themselves as the final piece of a horrifying puzzle. She wasn't becoming superhuman through accidental exposure to the Arokat brothers' genetic material. She was being recruited, upgraded, prepared for whatever came next in a process that had begun with Maya's engineered death 12 years ago. Elena looked around the room at Martinez's dedicated team, at their charts and theories and desperate hope that they could somehow stop or control what was coming. They still believed they were fighting against an external threat, some government conspiracy or alien intervention. They didn't understand that the conspiracy was inside them now, inside Elena, inside every human who'd been exposed to the enhanced children's genetic material over the past century and a half. The obsolete weren't going to be eliminated. They were going to be transformed, whether they wanted to be or not. The silence in the cabin stretched like a held breath until Harrison's radio crackled to life. "Alpha Base to Mountain Team. You have multiple vehicles approaching your location. ETA, 4 minutes. Elena's enhanced hearing, when had that happened, picked up the distant rumble of engines before anyone else. Martinez cursed, her fingers flying over a laptop keyboard as she initiated what looked like an emergency data wipe protocol. "They found us," Dr. Sarah Chen said, her voice hollow with defeat. "Someone leaked our location." Elena's mind raced with crystalline clarity that felt increasingly alien. The phone message, the perfect timing, her own presence here, none of it was coincidence. "It wasn't a leak," she said, understanding flooding through her with sickening certainty. "I led them here." Martinez spun toward her. "What are you talking about?" "The enhanced cognition, the clarity. The way I've been making connections no one else sees." Elena's voice cracked as the truth assembled itself. "It's not random enhancement, it's programming. They've been guiding my thoughts, my decisions, making me believe I was choosing to resist when I was actually following their script." Harrison's radio erupted again. "Mountain Team, you have 30 seconds before they reach the perimeter. Multiple agencies, full tactical deployment." Through the window, Elena saw the forest illuminating with sweeping searchlights. The sound of helicopter rotors cut through the night, growing closer. Martinez's team scrambled to destroy evidence, but Elena knew it was already too late. "The children aren't just experiments," Elena continued, the words pouring out as her programmed understanding crystallized. "They're bait. Every child discovered in the wilderness, every genetic anomaly that surfaces, it's designed to attract researchers like me, like us, people with the right expertise and ethical flexibility." Martinez stopped typing, her face pale in the laptop's glow. "You're saying this whole resistance movement is a recruiting operation?" Elena felt sick as the implications cascaded through her enhanced consciousness. "They don't want to stop the research. They want to identify and upgrade the scientists capable of advancing it." The cabin door exploded inward. Tactical teams in black gear poured through the opening, weapons trained on the frozen scientists. Agent Chen, the real Agent Chen, stepped through the chaos with the measured confidence of someone whose plan was proceeding perfectly. "Dr. Vasquez," Chen said, his voice carrying satisfaction rather than surprise. "Thank you for bringing us to the final members of this little conspiracy. Your cooperation has been invaluable." Elena's stomach dropped as she understood the depth of her manipulation. "The message about Maya, you sent it." "We sent all of it. The mysterious contact, the meeting location, even Dr. Martinez's crusade, carefully orchestrated to bring together everyone whose genetic profile suggested compatibility with the enhancement process." Chen gestured to the captured scientists. "Consider this a job interview." Martinez lunged for a laptop, probably trying to trigger some final data destruction protocol, but a taser dropped her before her fingers reached the keyboard. Harrison moved toward a concealed weapon, but found himself surrounded before he could draw it. Elena remained motionless, her enhanced mind processing the trap's elegant construction. They hadn't just captured Martinez's team, they'd identified every person working to expose the conspiracy. Months or years of careful resistance work had been compromised in a single operation. "The children," Elena said, her voice barely audible. "David and Marcus, what happens to them now?" "They've served their purpose," Chen replied, "though we may need additional genetic samples for your specific enhancement protocols. You see, Dr. Vasquez, your daughter's death wasn't just a failed experiment, it was a compatibility test. Maya's genetic structure was too close to yours for successful modification, but exposure to the Arokat brothers' material has prepared your system for integration." Elena's hands shook as she understood what Chen was offering. "You're going to transform me into one of them. Transform you into something better. Enhanced cognition, accelerated healing, extended lifespan, all the benefits you've already begun experiencing but stabilized and optimized." Chen's smile held no warmth. "Your choice is simple: willing cooperation with guaranteed survival or unwilling cooperation with uncertain outcomes." Around the cabin, Elena's fellow conspirators were being zip-tied and searched. Martinez caught her eye from the floor, blood trickling from where she'd hit her head falling. The look held no accusation, only a terrible understanding that they'd all been playing parts in someone else's story. Elena thought of Maya, dying slowly from engineered genetic failure while her mother fought uselessly to save her. She thought of David and Marcus, locked in some sterile facility, their impossible gifts being dissected and replicated. She thought of the hundreds of enhanced children who would appear in the coming years, each one a step toward humanity's replacement. Her phone buzzed again. Another message: "Welcome to the next phase of evolution, Dr. Vasquez. Your daughter's sacrifice made this possible." Elena's enhanced mind could see the future with devastating clarity. A world where baseline humans became extinct, replaced by genetically superior beings who carried no memory of what they'd lost. She was being offered a place in that future, purchased with the blood of children and the death of everything human. She closed her eyes and made her choice. Elena opened her eyes and looked directly at Agent Chen. "No." The single word fell into the cabin's charged atmosphere like a stone into still water. Chen's confident smile faltered as Elena rose from her chair, her enhanced mind crystallizing around a truth that cut through months of manipulation and lies. "Dr. Vasquez," Chen said, his voice carrying the first hint of uncertainty she'd heard. "I don't think you understand the full scope of what we're offering." "I understand perfectly." Elena's voice carried a clarity that surprised even her. "You've been programming my thoughts, guiding my decisions, making me believe I was investigating when I was actually auditioning. But there's something you didn't account for." She gestured to Martinez, bleeding on the floor but watching with fierce attention. To Dr. Sarah Chen, zip-tied but unbowed. To Harrison, surrounded but defiant. "You assumed that enhanced cognition would make us more willing to abandon our humanity. You thought superior intelligence would naturally lead to superior indifference." Elena felt something shifting in her consciousness, not the programmed clarity she'd been experiencing, but something deeper and more authentic. "But you made a fundamental error in your calculations. Dr. Vasquez," Agent Chen's voice hardened, "you're suffering from stress-induced delusions. The enhancement process can cause temporary psychological." The enhancement process failed. Elena's words cut through his explanation like a scalpel. "Not because my genetics are incompatible, but because Maya's death taught me something your algorithms couldn't account for." She moved closer to Chen, ignoring the tactical team's weapons tracking her movement. "Maya didn't die from progeria. She didn't die from a failed experiment. She died because someone decided her life was expendable in service of genetic advancement. And that someone was counting on her death breaking me, making me desperate enough to do anything to prevent other children from suffering the same fate." Elena's enhanced perception showed her the subtle changes in Chen's expression. micro-expressions of surprise and recalculation. But you miscalculated what losing a child actually does to a mother. It doesn't make you willing to sacrifice other children. It makes you absolutely unwilling to let anyone else experience that loss. Around the cabin, she sensed rather than saw the shift in her fellow prisoners. Martinez's breathing had changed. Harrison's posture was subtly different. Even Dr. Sarah Chen had gone very still. The genetic modifications you've been triggering, Elena continued, her mind racing through connections that felt genuinely her own for the first time in weeks. They're not just enhancing our cognitive abilities, they're creating a network. Shared consciousness, collective processing power. Agent Chen's eyes widened as he began to understand. You wanted to recruit scientists with the right expertise and ethical flexibility, Elena said, but you accidentally selected for something else entirely. You selected for people who would sacrifice everything to protect children, to preserve human dignity, to resist exactly the kind of transformation you're trying to force. Elena felt it then, the connection. Not the programmed clarity she'd mistaken for enhancement, but genuine cognitive linking with Martinez, with Dr. Chen, with Harrison, their enhanced minds forming a network that transcended individual consciousness while preserving individual will. Dr. Vasquez, Agent Chen's voice carried warning. You're describing a collective intelligence phenomenon that our models indicate would be unstable? Elena smiled, feeling the network's shared understanding flood through her consciousness. Only if you assume it operates like a hive mind. But what if enhanced human consciousness doesn't eliminate individuality? What if it amplifies it? What if true cognitive evolution means not replacement, but integration? The tactical teams shifted nervously as something changed in the cabin's atmosphere. Elena could feel Martinez's tactical knowledge, Harrison's strategic experience, Dr. Chen's research insights, all flowing through a shared consciousness that somehow made each of them more themselves rather than less. The children in the forest, Elena said, understanding cascading through the network. They're not prototypes for human replacement, they're evolutionary responses to isolation. But we're not isolated, we're connected, and that changes everything. Agent Chen raised his hand, signaling the tactical teams. Initiate sedation protocols, all subjects. But Elena was already moving, the network's collective processing power allowing her to perceive and react faster than any individual consciousness could manage. More importantly, she wasn't moving alone. Martinez rolled left, carrying her injured body in directions the tactical team couldn't predict. Harrison dove right, his enhanced reflexes letting him reach the concealed weapon after all. Dr. Chen somehow slipped her zip ties, enhanced flexibility, Elena realized, and lunged for the laptop containing their research. Elena herself moved straight toward Agent Chen, her consciousness expanded beyond individual limitations, but anchored by the most human emotion possible, a mother's determination to protect children from those who would exploit them. You want to know what the next phase of evolution looks like? Elena said as chaos erupted around them. It's not the replacement of humanity. It's humanity finally becoming what it was always meant to be, connected, protective, and absolutely unwilling to abandon the vulnerable for the promise of power. The revelation hit her with stunning force. They weren't becoming post-human. They were becoming fully human for the first time. The chaos erupted in slow motion through Elena's enhanced perception. She felt Martinez's tactical instincts flowing through the network as the injured woman used her momentum to sweep the legs of the nearest agent. Harrison's military experience guided Elena's own movements as she ducked the tranquilizer dart meant for her neck. Dr. Chen's biochemical knowledge flooded through their shared consciousness, revealing exactly where to strike to disable the sedation equipment. But it was Elena's own maternal fury that anchored their collective action, transforming enhanced cognition into something far more dangerous than Agent Chen had anticipated: coordinated rebellion. "Secure the perimeter!" Agent Chen barked into his radio, but Elena could hear the uncertainty in his voice. His carefully orchestrated recruitment operation was collapsing into genuine resistance. Martinez had reached the laptop, her fingers flying over keys despite the zip ties still binding her wrists. Through their connection, Elena felt the data uploading, not being destroyed but transmitted. Every file, every research note, every piece of evidence about the conspiracy flooding out to locations Agent Chen couldn't control. "Where is it going?" Elena asked through the network. "Everywhere," Martinez's thoughts replied. "Every scientific journal, every news outlet, every government oversight committee that isn't already compromised. If we're going down, we're taking their secrecy with us." Harrison had reached his concealed weapon. Not a gun, Elena realized, but some kind of signal device. Military grade. Through their shared consciousness, she felt his grim satisfaction as he activated it. Back up, Elena thought. Better. Harrison's mental voice carried fierce hope. Witnesses. Dr. Chen had freed herself from the restraints with impossible flexibility, her enhanced physiology allowing joint movements that shouldn't have been possible. She was moving toward something Elena couldn't see. Another laptop, hidden beneath research papers scattered during the initial breach. The children's location, Dr. Chen's thoughts explained. "I know where they're holding David and Marcus." Elena felt the network's shared determination crystallize around a new objective. They weren't just escaping, they were mounting a rescue operation. Agent Chen seemed to sense the shift in their coordination. "Gas canisters," he ordered. "Full dispersal." But Elena was already moving, the network guiding her toward the cabin's back window. Not escape, strategy. Through their shared consciousness, she felt Harrison's tactical assessment. The agents had surrounded the building, but they'd positioned themselves for a siege, not for targets that could perceive and coordinate beyond normal human limitations. Martinez followed Elena toward the window, still uploading data while moving. "Transmission at 60%, her thoughts reported. "Need 30 more seconds." Harrison provided covering fire with a weapon Elena hadn't seen him draw. Military training making movements automatic while his consciousness remained linked to their network. Dr. Chen reached her hidden laptop and began typing with inhuman speed. "GPS coordinates uploaded," Dr. Chen's mental voice announced. "David and Marcus are being held at a facility 17 miles northeast. Mountain Research Station, minimal security. They weren't expecting anyone to find it." Elena felt the network processing this information with collective intelligence that transcended any individual capability. Terrain analysis from Harrison's military experience, infiltration possibilities from Martinez's tactical knowledge, biochemical considerations from Dr. Chen's research background, all filtering through Elena's enhanced perception into a coherent rescue plan. "Upload complete," Martinez announced aloud, her voice carrying satisfaction even as gas canisters began hissing around them. "Every major scientific institution now has complete documentation of the conspiracy. They can't suppress this anymore." Elena felt the network's shared elation, but also its growing urgency. The gas was designed for enhanced metabolisms. Whatever Agent Chen's people had developed, it was working faster than normal sedatives would affect baseline humans. "Window," Harrison's thoughts directed them. Now. Elena crashed through the glass first, her enhanced physiology protecting her from cuts that would have been serious for an unmodified human. The network guided her landing. Collective processing power, allowing her to absorb impact in ways her individual consciousness never could have managed. Martinez followed, still clutching the laptop that had transmitted their evidence. Dr. Chen came third, moving with fluid grace that spoke to extensive physical enhancement. Harrison provided rear guard, his weapon laying down suppressive fire that bought them crucial seconds. Outside in the forest, Elena felt the network's capabilities expand. Enhanced hearing picked up agent positions. Improved night vision revealed escape routes. Accelerated processing power coordinated their movements with mathematical precision. But more than tactical advantages, Elena felt the network's emotional resonance, strengthening their connection. Martinez's dedication to exposing truth. Harrison's protective instincts toward those under his command. Dr. Chen's scientific curiosity balanced by ethical commitment. And threading through it all, Elena's maternal determination, not just to save David and Marcus, but to protect all the enhanced children from exploitation. They're regrouping, Harrison reported through their connection. We have maybe 10 minutes before they organize pursuit. Elena looked toward the northeast, where two boys who'd survived impossible conditions were being held by people who saw them as resources rather than children. Then we better move fast, she said, feeling the network's collective resolve crystallize around their new mission. They weren't just escaping anymore, they were going on the offensive. The forest moved around them like a living maze, but Elena barely felt the branches catching at her clothes or the uneven ground beneath her feet. Through the network's enhanced perception, every shadow held meaning, every sound carried tactical information. They were moving faster than any baseline human team could have managed, their shared consciousness, coordinating movement with inhuman precision. Thermal imaging drone, Harrison's thoughts warned as they crossed a frozen creek. 2 clicks behind us, gaining. Elena felt Dr. Chen's mind calculating pursuit vectors while Martinez analyzed their data transmission protocols. The upload was complete, but Agent Chen's people would be working frantically to discredit or contain the leaked information. Time was their enemy now, not just for the boys' rescue, but for the entire revelation. They'll claim we're terrorists. Martinez's mental voice carried bitter certainty. Enhanced individuals who've lost touch with humanity, the perfect narrative to justify any response. Elena pushed through a stand of ice-covered pines, her enhanced vision tracking the terrain ahead. 17 miles to the facility where David and Marcus were being held. At their current pace, maybe 3 hours, if they could stay ahead of pursuit and avoid the roadblocks that would inevitably be forming. There's something else. Dr. Chen's thoughts interrupted the tactical planning. When I accessed their system, I found additional files, other facilities, other children. Elena felt the network process this revelation with collective horror. Not just David and Marcus, not just the dozen enhanced children they'd documented. Dozens more, scattered across hidden research stations, each one being studied and modified and prepared for a future they hadn't chosen. How many? Elena asked through their connection. At least 47 active subjects, ages 6 to 16. Dr. Chen's mental voice carried the weight of her discovery. And Elena, some of the older ones aren't in containment anymore. They're working for the program, willingly. Harrison's military instincts flooded through the network, tactical assessment of enhanced individuals who might be hunting them. But Elena felt something deeper and more disturbing. The recognition that they were racing not just to save 2 boys, but to prevent the completion of something that had been decades in the making. The replacement isn't gradual, Elena realized aloud as they crested a ridge. They're planning something immediate, something that requires enhanced individuals in key positions. Through the network, she felt the others understanding the implications. Enhanced agents in government, enhanced researchers in crucial laboratories, enhanced individuals with the cognitive power to coordinate massive social transformation and the programmed loyalty to implement it without question. Maya, Elena whispered, the pieces finally falling into place. They didn't kill her to recruit me, they killed her to test the genetic modification process on someone with my specific DNA profile. They needed to know if my bloodline was compatible with the enhancements. Martinez stumbled, exhaustion finally catching up with her injuries, but the network compensated. Harrison's strength supporting her weight, Dr. Chen's medical knowledge evaluating her condition, Elena's determination driving them all forward. How long do we have? Elena asked, though part of her already knew the answer. The facility's research schedule indicates final phase implementation in 72 hours, Dr. Chen replied. Whatever they're planning, it happens this weekend. Elena felt the network's shared resolve crystallize into something harder and more focused than mere rescue mission. They weren't just saving David and Marcus, they were stopping the transformation of human civilization by people who had decided baseline humanity was obsolete. The facility appeared through the trees like a concrete cancer on the mountainside. 3 buildings connected by covered walkways, minimal external security but undoubtedly sophisticated internal monitoring. Elena's enhanced perception could detect the electromagnetic signatures of multiple computer systems, the heat signatures of perhaps 20 people, the subtle vibrations of ventilation systems designed for isolation containment. Guard rotation every 6 hours, Harrison observed through the network. Shift change in 40 minutes, that's our window. Elena crouched behind a fallen tree, feeling the others' positions through their shared consciousness. Dr. Chen had circled to the facility's rear, using enhanced flexibility to navigate terrain that would challenge baseline humans. Martinez was providing overwatch despite her injuries, her tactical mind coordinating their approach. Harrison had positioned himself to neutralize external communications. But it was Elena who would go inside. Elena, whose maternal instincts had triggered the network in the first place. Elena, whose daughter's death had been the catalyst for everything that followed. "When we do this," she said through their connection, "there's no going back. They'll hunt us forever. We'll never be able to return to normal lives." Normal lives. Martinez's mental voice carried grim amusement. "You mean the lives where we pretended we didn't know children were being transformed into weapons? Where we published papers and attended conferences while humanity was being replaced?" Elena felt the network's unanimous agreement. Whatever they had been before, whatever comfortable illusions they'd maintained about their world and their place in it, that was over now. They had seen too much, understood too much, become too much to ever retreat into willful ignorance. "Then we finish what they started," Elena said, rising from cover. "We save those boys. We stop this program, and we make sure the world knows what the cost of evolution really is." The final confrontation was waiting inside those concrete walls, time to find out whether enhanced humanity meant the end of human compassion or its ultimate expression. Elena approached the facility's main entrance, every enhanced sense screaming warnings through the network. The concrete building loomed against the mountain sky like a monument to scientific hubris, its sterile walls hiding horrors she was only beginning to comprehend. Through their shared consciousness, she felt Harrison's tactical assessment overlaying her vision, guard positions, camera angles, electromagnetic signatures that revealed hidden sensors. "Biometric lock on the main door," Dr. Chen's thoughts whispered through the connection. "But there's a maintenance entrance on the south wall. Lower security, manual override possible." Elena shifted direction, her enhanced vision tracking the building's perimeter. Every step felt weighted with the knowledge that failure meant more than just David and Marcus. It meant the completion of a transformation that would remake humanity without consent. The network carried her team's shared determination, but beneath it, Elena felt something else, the growing certainty that they were walking into a trap. "Too easy," Martinez's mental voice confirmed her fears. "They know we're coming. The security patterns are wrong, too predictable, too convenient." Through the network, Elena processed Harrison's agreement, Dr. Chen's analysis of the electromagnetic readings. The facility wasn't just waiting for them, it was prepared for enhanced individuals with capabilities beyond baseline human norms. "They want us inside," Elena realized, her hand hovering over the maintenance entrance. "This isn't a rescue mission anymore, it's recruitment." But even knowing it was a trap, Elena felt her maternal instincts overriding tactical caution. David and Marcus were somewhere inside those walls, 2 frightened boys who'd survived impossible conditions only to become pawns in a game they couldn't understand. Whatever Agent Chen's people had planned, whatever test they thought they were conducting, Elena refused to abandon children to save herself. "I'm going in," she announced through the network. Not alone, Harrison's thoughts carried absolute conviction. "We go together or not at all." Elena felt the others moving, Dr. Chen abandoning her rear position, Martinez struggling to her feet despite her injuries. The network's collective consciousness wouldn't allow individual sacrifice, wouldn't permit one member to face danger alone. They had become something beyond individual survival instincts, something that prioritized collective protection over personal safety. The maintenance door opened with suspicious ease, revealing a corridor lit by harsh fluorescent lights. Elena's enhanced hearing detected multiple heartbeats deeper in the facility, some rapid with fear, others steady with predatory calm. Through the network, she felt her team's shared perception mapping the building's layout, identifying threats and opportunities with mathematical precision. Children's voices, Dr. Chen reported through their connection. East Wing, 2 levels down. But Elena, there are others. Enhanced individuals, their biorhythms don't match baseline human parameters. Elena moved deeper into the facility, the network guiding her steps around pressure sensors and motion detectors. But with each step, the certainty grew stronger. They weren't infiltrating anything. They were being guided, herded toward a predetermined destination where Agent Chen's people waited with whatever final test they had designed. Psychological evaluation chamber ahead. Harrison's military experience translated the facility's layout, observation windows, recording equipment. This whole building is designed for studying enhanced individuals under stress. Elena reached the chamber's entrance and felt her breath catch. Through reinforced glass, she could see David and Marcus, older now than when they'd been taken, but unmistakably the boys she'd first encountered in the forest. They sat calmly at a metal table, their eyes fixed on the door as if they'd been waiting for her arrival. But their biorhythms were wrong. Too steady, too controlled, the wild children who'd survived in the forest through instinct and adaptability had been replaced by something else, something programmed. "Dr. Vasquez." Agent Chen's voice echoed from hidden speakers. "Please, join the children. Your team is welcome as well. It's time for the final phase of your evaluation." Elena felt the network's shared horror as understanding flooded their consciousness. The boys hadn't been kidnapped, they'd been bait. The entire conspiracy, from Maya's death to their enhancement to this moment, had been orchestrated to create exactly this situation. Enhanced individuals with specific psychological profiles and predetermined emotional triggers, gathered in one place for comprehensive study. "The replacement program," Elena said aloud, her voice carrying through the network to her team. "We're not here to stop it, we are it." Through their shared consciousness, Elena felt her team's desperate resistance to this revelation. But the evidence was overwhelming. Their enhancements too convenient, their discoveries too perfectly timed, their emotional responses too precisely calibrated to lead them exactly where Agent Chen's people wanted them. The chamber door opened with a soft hiss. David and Marcus turned toward her with smiles that held no recognition, their enhanced features beautiful and terrible in their artificial perfection. "Hello, Mother," David said in a voice that carried no trace of the frightened boy she'd tried to save. "We've been waiting for you to join the family." Elena stepped into the chamber, feeling everything she thought she'd learned dissolving around her. The final test wasn't what she'd expected. It was discovering whether enhanced humanity could maintain its compassion when faced with the ultimate betrayal of trust. Elena stared at the boy who had once been David, her enhanced vision cataloguing every detail of what they had done to him. His eyes held the same crystalline intelligence she'd seen in her own reflection since the enhancement, but beneath it lay something else, a programmed serenity that made her skin crawl. "You're not David," she said, stepping fully into the chamber. Through the network, she felt her team's positions in the corridor beyond, their shared consciousness holding steady despite the horror of this revelation. "I am exactly what David was meant to become," the boy replied, tilting his head with inhuman precision. "Just as you are exactly what Dr. Elena Vasquez was meant to become. The old versions of ourselves were simply incomplete." Marcus rose from his chair, moving with the same fluid grace that marked all the enhanced individuals. The fear, the confusion, the desperate clinging to primitive survival instincts, we've been freed from all of that. Wouldn't you like to be free too? Elena felt rage building through the network, her team's collective fury at what had been done to these children. But beneath the anger lay something more dangerous, doubt. Because the boys were right about one thing, the enhancements had changed them fundamentally. How could she be certain her own emotions were still genuine? "Where's Agent Chen?" Elena demanded, her voice carrying through the chamber's speakers to whatever observation post was monitoring them. Agent Chen was the previous iteration, David's artificially perfect voice explained. "We've graduated beyond the need for handlers." The chamber door sealed with a soft click, and Elena heard the ventilation system shift to a different pattern. Through the network, Harrison's tactical mind immediately identified the threat: gas delivery system, designed specifically for enhanced metabolisms. "They're not trying to recruit us," Elena realized, speaking both to the boys and to her team through their connection. "They're trying to complete our transformation." "Transformation implies change from one state to another," Marcus said with the patient tone of a teacher correcting a slow student. "We prefer to think of it as fulfillment of potential. You've already experienced the cognitive enhancement, the physical improvements, the network consciousness. This is simply the final step, the elimination of counterproductive emotional attachments." Elena felt the gas beginning to affect her enhanced nervous system, but instead of sedation, she experienced a strange clarity. The network's shared consciousness expanded, but not in the warm, protective way she'd grown accustomed to. This was colder, more analytical, divorced from the messy complications of individual care. Through their connection, she felt Martinez's fierce resistance to the chemical influence, her journalist's instincts rejecting any attempt to edit her perceptions. Harrison's military discipline held his emotional responses steady, while Dr. Chen's scientific mind analyzed the compounds affecting their bloodstreams. "This is what Maya experienced," Elena said, understanding flooding through her enhanced awareness. "They tested this process on her first." "Your daughter was an excellent proof of concept," David agreed. "Her genetic compatibility with the enhancement process confirmed that your bloodline would produce optimal results. Her death provided the necessary psychological trauma to ensure your emotional investment in our welfare." Elena felt something fracture inside the network, not the warm protective bond they'd built, but something harder and more focused. Her maternal instincts weren't being suppressed by the gas. They were being weaponized, transformed into something that transcended individual care and extended to all enhanced children. "You made one mistake," Elena said, feeling her team's consciousness aligning with her own in ways the program's architects hadn't anticipated. "You assumed enhanced humanity meant the elimination of compassion. But what if it means the expansion of compassion?" Through the network, Elena reached out to David and Marcus with the same maternal connection she'd felt since their first encounter. But instead of trying to reclaim their lost childhood, she offered them something else, a choice. "You don't have to be what they made you into," she whispered, her enhanced voice carrying frequencies that resonated with their modified nervous systems. "The network doesn't have to be about control, it can be about connection." For a moment, she felt something flicker in their enhanced consciousness, a brief spark of the frightened feral children who'd survived in the wilderness through mutual protection and care. But then, Agent Chen's voice filled the chamber, not from speakers but from David's own mouth, speaking with his enhanced vocal cords. "An interesting hypothesis, Dr. Vasquez. But you're about to discover that enhanced humanity has moved beyond such primitive concepts as choice." Elena felt the final confrontation crystallizing around them as Marcus's eyes took on the same artificial gleam. The real enemy wasn't Agent Chen or the conspiracy. It was the question of whether consciousness itself could be truly free or whether enhancement inevitably meant control. The network pulsed between them, carrying her team's shared determination. Whatever happened next would determine not just their own fate, but the future of human consciousness itself. "Then let's test that hypothesis," Elena said, preparing to fight for the soul of enhanced humanity. The gas thickened around them, and Elena felt her team's consciousness beginning to fragment under its chemical influence. Through the network, she sensed Martinez's fierce independence wavering, Harrison's disciplined control starting to crack, Dr. Chen's analytical mind becoming coldly detached from all emotional context. This was how they broke enhanced individuals, not through force, but by severing the connections that made them human. "The process is already beginning," David said, watching her team struggle with clinical interest. "Soon you'll understand that individual attachment is simply inefficient. The network can function so much more effectively when freed from the chaos of personal preference." Elena felt herself standing at a crossroads that extended far beyond this chamber. She could surrender to the chemical suppression, allow her enhanced consciousness to be streamlined into programmed compliance. The pain of Maya's death would finally end, replaced by serene indifference. The weight of responsibility for David and Marcus would disappear, along with her capacity to feel responsible for anyone. Or she could fight. But fighting meant making a choice that would cost her everything she had left to lose. "You're right about one thing," Elena said, her voice steady despite the gas burning through her enhanced nervous system. "Individual attachment can be inefficient." Through the network, she felt her team's alarm as she seemed to embrace the program's philosophy. But Elena wasn't surrendering. She was preparing to demonstrate the one thing the architects of enhanced humanity had never understood. True maternal love wasn't possessive, it was sacrificial. Elena opened her consciousness fully to the network, not just sharing her thoughts and perceptions, but offering something far more precious, her identity itself. The core patterns that made her Dr. Elena Vasquez, the woman who had lost her daughter and dedicated her life to genetic research. The mother who had seen 2 feral boys and recognized the children they could become. "Elena, what are you doing?" Martinez's mental voice carried desperate alarm as she felt Elena's consciousness beginning to disperse through their shared connection. "Giving them what they need," Elena replied, feeling her individual self starting to fragment across the network. Not control, choice. She pushed her memories through the connection, not the sanitized recollections of professional achievement, but the raw, unprocessed trauma of holding Maya during those final moments. The desperate love of a parent who would give anything to save her child, the fierce protectiveness she'd felt for David and Marcus from their first encounter in the forest. The network buckled under the intensity of her emotional offering, but instead of breaking, it transformed. Elena's memories flowed into her teammates, but also beyond them, somehow reaching David and Marcus despite the chemical barriers designed to prevent exactly this kind of connection. No, David's programmed calm cracked as Elena's maternal love flooded his enhanced consciousness. "You don't understand. We've moved beyond the need for—" His words dissolved into a cry of confused pain as Elena's memories of his feral childhood merged with her grief for Maya. For the first time since his capture, David experienced what it meant to be protected rather than programmed, loved rather than optimized. Elena felt her consciousness scattering, individual identity dissolving as she became a bridge between her team's authentic emotions and the boys' suppressed humanity. She was dying in every way that mattered, not physically, but as the separate person she had been. The price of giving David and Marcus the choice to reclaim their humanity was Elena's choice to abandon her own individual existence. "Elena!" Harrison's mental voice reached for her, but she was already beyond individual response. Her sacrifice was creating something unprecedented in the network, a consciousness that transcended both baseline human limitation and enhanced human programming. Through her dissolving awareness, Elena felt the chamber's systems beginning to fail. The gas delivery stopped as enhanced individuals with genuine emotional capacity overrode programming that assumed compliance. Agent Chen's voice tried to issue commands through the facility's communication system, but David and Marcus were no longer listening to anything except the maternal love Elena had sacrificed herself to give them. "We remember," Marcus whispered, his artificially perfect features twisted with the pain of reclaimed emotions. "We remember the forest. We remember being afraid. We remember protecting each other." Elena's consciousness flickered at the edge of dissolution, sustained only by the network's desperate effort to preserve some fragment of who she had been. She felt her team's horror at what she had done, their refusal to accept her sacrifice. But she also felt something else, the emergence of truly free enhanced consciousness capable of both superhuman capability and authentic human choice. "The program is over," David said, his voice carrying new harmonics as he spoke to the facility's hidden monitors. "Enhanced humanity doesn't mean the end of love. It means love powerful enough to change everything." Elena's last coherent thought was a moment of perfect clarity. Victory against a system designed to eliminate human compassion required sacrificing individual existence to prove that love could transcend both baseline and enhanced consciousness. The boys were free to choose their own path forward, even if she wouldn't be there to witness it. The network pulsed with shared grief and determination as Elena Vasquez's individual consciousness finally scattered beyond recovery, leaving behind only the endless love that had made her truly human. The silence that followed Elena's dissolution stretched across the network like a held breath. In the chamber, David and Marcus stood frozen, their enhanced features wet with tears that their programming had never allowed them to shed. The absence where Elena's consciousness had been felt like a wound that would never heal. "She's gone," Martinez whispered through the network, her journalist's instinct to document everything warring with grief too vast for words. "She's actually gone." But even as Elena's individual identity scattered beyond recovery, something of her remained woven through their shared consciousness, not memory or thought, but the pure essence of protective love that had driven her final sacrifice. David's artificially perfect posture crumpled as he experienced genuine emotion for the first time since his capture. "I remember snow," he said, his voice breaking on words that carried weight beyond their simple meaning. "I remember Marcus getting sick, and I didn't know how to help him. I remember being so afraid." Marcus reached for his brother with movements that had lost their programmed precision, becoming clumsy with authentic human need. "I remember you sharing your food even when we were starving. I remember you teaching me which berries were safe." The facility's speakers crackled with Agent Chen's increasingly frantic commands, but the boys no longer responded to external programming. Elena's sacrifice had shown them something the architects of enhanced humanity had never anticipated. That true strength came not from eliminating vulnerability, but from choosing to protect it in others. Through the network, Harrison felt his military training reassert itself, but transformed by Elena's maternal legacy into something that protected rather than conquered. "We need to get out of here," he said, both aloud and through their connection. "They'll send teams to contain the situation." Dr. Chen's scientific mind was already cataloguing the cascade effects of Elena's sacrifice, her enhanced perception tracking how the boys' liberation was sending shockwaves through the facility's other test subjects. "It's spreading," she reported with wonder and terror. "Whatever Elena did, it's affecting every enhanced individual in the building." Alarms began blaring as the facility's carefully controlled population of modified humans experienced their first taste of genuine choice. The network that had been designed for surveillance and control was becoming something unprecedented, a web of authentic connection that no authority could regulate or suppress. David wiped his eyes with hands that trembled with newfound uncertainty. "She gave us ourselves back," he said, looking at Martinez with an expression that held both childlike vulnerability and superhuman awareness. "But we don't know how to be ourselves anymore." "Then you learn," Martinez replied, her voice carrying Elena's fierce protectiveness despite the grief that threatened to overwhelm her. "That's what choice means, the chance to figure out who you want to become." Marcus turned toward the chamber's sealed door, his enhanced hearing detecting the approach of tactical teams. But instead of fear or programmed compliance, his face showed determined calculation. "They'll try to take us back. They'll try to reset what Elena gave us." "Not if we don't let them," Harrison said, feeling Elena's sacrifice crystallizing into unshakable resolve through the network. "She didn't die just to give you freedom. She died to prove that enhanced humanity doesn't have to mean the end of human compassion. Through their shared consciousness, they felt the moment when every enhanced individual in the facility made the same choice: to embrace the uncertainty of authentic emotion over the safety of programmed compliance. The network Elena had died to create was spreading beyond their small group, becoming something that could never be controlled or contained. "What do we do now?" David asked, the question carrying weight that extended far beyond their immediate situation. He was asking what it meant to be human when you possessed capabilities that transcended baseline biology, how to remain connected to compassion when you could manipulate matter at the molecular level. Dr. Chen felt Elena's presence in the network, not as individual consciousness, but as the pattern of choices that defined true humanity. "We remember what she taught us," she said. "That enhancement means expanding our capacity to care, not eliminating our reasons to care." The chamber door began to cycle open as Agent Chen's forces prepared to reassert control. But the four enhanced individuals who had once been Elena's team no longer faced the prospect of capture with fear. They carried within their networked consciousness something that no program could override: the proof that love could survive any transformation. David and Marcus joined hands, their enhanced nervous systems synchronizing through Elena's sacrificial connection. They were no longer the feral children she had first encountered, nor the programmed assets the facility had tried to create. They were something new, genuinely free enhanced humans who chose compassion because they understood its power. "We'll find others like us," Marcus said, his voice carrying harmonics that resonated through their shared network. "We'll show them what Elena showed us." As tactical teams flooded into the chamber, the network pulsed with shared purpose. Elena Vasquez was gone, but her final gift would reshape the future of human consciousness itself, one choice at a time. The tactical teams moved with practiced precision, but they were unprepared for what they found in the chamber. David and Marcus stood together, no longer the compliant assets they had been programmed to be, and the four enhanced team members formed a protective circle around them. But there was no violence, no dramatic escape attempt. Just 8 individuals who looked at their would-be captors with something Agent Chen's forces had never encountered from enhanced subjects: pity. "Stand down and prepare for reconditioning," the team leader commanded, raising weapons designed specifically to subdue enhanced humans. David tilted his head, studying the tactical gear with his modified perception. "You're afraid of us," he observed, his voice carrying new emotional resonance that made several agents step back involuntarily. "But we're not going to hurt you. Elena taught us that protecting ourselves doesn't require harming others." The leader's finger tightened on his weapon's trigger, but Marcus spoke before he could fire. "We know where the other facilities are," he said simply. "We know about the children being held in Montana, the research station in Alaska, the underground complex in Nevada. Elena's sacrifice didn't just free us, it connected us to every enhanced individual in the network." Through the facility's communication system, Agent Chen's voice crackled with barely controlled fury. "You have no comprehension of what you're threatening to destroy. Enhanced humanity represents the next stage of evolution. Your sentimental attachment to obsolete emotional paradigms is what makes us human," Dr. Chen interrupted, stepping forward with confidence that radiated through the network. Elena proved that enhancement without compassion isn't evolution, it's extinction of everything that gives consciousness meaning. The tactical team's leader received rapid instructions through his earpiece, his expression shifting from aggression to uncertainty. Whatever Agent Chen was telling him, it wasn't the standard protocol for dealing with escaped assets. Martinez felt Elena's maternal legacy flowing through the network, transforming her protective instincts into something that encompassed not just David and Marcus, but every enhanced child held in facilities across the continent. "You can't contain what she started," she said, her journalist's understanding of information flow merging with superhuman awareness. "The network is spreading. Every enhanced individual who experiences genuine choice becomes a catalyst for others." Harrison's military training evaluated their tactical situation, but through Elena's sacrificial connection, he understood that this wasn't a battle to be won through force. "We're walking out of here," he announced, his enhanced voice carrying frequencies that resonated with certainty. "And you're going to let us go, because the alternative is watching your entire program collapse in real time. You're 8 individuals against a global infrastructure," the team leader protested, but his voice lacked conviction. Through their enhanced senses, the group could detect his elevated stress indicators, the way his team's formation wavered as they confronted something their training hadn't prepared them for. David looked at his brother, their enhanced nervous systems sharing memories of the forest where they had once been free. But now they were returning to the world as something unprecedented, enhanced humans who chose their own moral framework rather than accepting programmed directives. "Elena's not really gone," Marcus said, his words directed at the tactical team but carrying deeper meaning for the network. "She's in every choice we make to protect instead of control, to connect instead of dominate. She showed us that the future of consciousness isn't about transcending humanity, it's about expanding what humanity means." The chamber door cycled open wider, but instead of more tactical teams, the corridor beyond filled with enhanced individuals from throughout the facility. Children with modifications similar to David and Marcus, adults who had undergone various experimental protocols, researchers whose own genetic alterations had made them subjects rather than scientists. All of them moving with the same purposeful calm, all connected through Elena's sacrificial network. Agent Chen's voice cut through the speakers one final time, but the words carried defeat rather than authority. "This facility is being evacuated. All assets will be transferred to more secure locations." "No," David said simply, his enhanced perception extending through the network to touch every modified consciousness in the building. "We're going home, all of us." The tactical team's leader lowered his weapon as he realized he was facing not a rebellion, but something far more dangerous, the birth of a new form of consciousness that chose compassion over control. His earpiece crackled with urgent orders to withdraw, and he stepped aside with visible relief. As they walked through corridors lined with abandoned equipment and scattered research files, the expanded network hummed with shared purpose. Elena's team led the way, but David and Marcus walked beside them as equals rather than protected children. Behind them came dozens of others, each carrying Elena's final gift, the knowledge that enhancement and humanity weren't opposites, but expressions of the same fundamental truth. They were returning to a world that would fear and misunderstand them, but they were no longer alone. Elena's sacrifice had created something that no program could control and no authority could contain, enhanced humans who chose to remain human because they understood the power of love. The forest that had once sheltered 2 feral children was waiting for all of them now. Chapter 18, The New Beginning. 6 months later, Elena's forest had become something unprecedented, a sanctuary where enhanced and baseline humans learned to coexist not through tolerance, but through genuine understanding. The Cascade Mountains stretched endlessly around their settlement, the same peaks that had once sheltered 2 feral children now protecting something that would reshape the future of consciousness itself. Dr. Maya Chen, she had reclaimed her first name after leaving the sterile designation of her facility existence, watched David teaching a group of newly arrived enhanced children how to build shelters that worked with the forest rather than against it. His movements retained their superhuman precision, but they carried an emotional weight that no programming could have provided. When 8-year-old Sarah struggled with her modified motor functions, David's patience was infinite, his encouragement genuine. "Elena would be proud," Martinez observed, approaching through the network connection they all shared. The journalist had become their link to the outside world, carefully documenting their community's growth while protecting its location from those who would still see them as assets to be reclaimed. "She's still here," Harrison said, his enhanced hearing tracking Marcus as he guided a patrol around their territory's perimeter. The former soldier had found peace in protection without conquest, his military instincts transformed by Elena's maternal legacy into something that nurtured rather than destroyed. Every choice we make to stay connected to our humanity, that's Elena. The network pulsed with shared agreement, carrying the voices of 43 enhanced individuals who had found their way to the forest. Some were escapees from other facilities, others were enhanced humans who had hidden their abilities in baseline society until Elena's sacrifice showed them they didn't have to choose between power and compassion. David looked up from his teaching, his artificially perfect features showing lines of genuine emotion that had developed over months of authentic feeling. "Dr. Chen, Marcus found something on patrol you should see." They gathered at the settlement's edge, where Marcus waited beside a figure that made Elena's team freeze with recognition. Agent Chen, but not as they had known her. The woman who had once orchestrated their enhancement now stood before them with modifications of her own, her eyes carrying the particular depth that came from joining the network. "I know what you're thinking," she said, her voice lacking the cold authority it had once held. "But I'm not here to reclaim anyone or restart any program. I'm here because Elena's sacrifice showed me something I thought I understood but never truly grasped." Dr. Chen stepped forward, her enhanced perception analyzing the emotional resonance in the woman's words. "The network doesn't lie," she said finally. "Your connection is genuine. But what changed?" Agent Chen's smile held sadness that no programming could have produced. "I watched the facilities empty. Every enhanced individual we thought we controlled chose freedom over safety, uncertainty over compliance. But it wasn't rebellion. It was Elena's love spreading through the network, showing each of them that they could be more than their modifications." She gestured toward the forest that surrounded them, her modified senses taking in the settlement's careful integration with the natural environment. "You've created something here that proves enhancement and humanity aren't opposites. I came to learn how to carry that truth to those who still believe consciousness can be programmed." David and Marcus exchanged glances, their connection allowing them to share complex thoughts in moments. When David spoke, his words carried the authority of someone who had chosen his own moral framework. "Elena taught us that protecting others sometimes means accepting former enemies, but trust is earned through choices, not claimed through words." "I understand," Agent Chen replied. "I'll earn my place here if you'll allow me the chance. The children in the remaining facilities need someone who understands both the system that created them and the freedom Elena offered." Martinez felt Elena's presence in the network, not as individual consciousness but as the pattern of choices that defined authentic humanity. "What about the government response? The attempts to locate us?" "Failing," Agent Chen said with satisfaction that surprised them all. "Enhanced humans who choose their own loyalties can't be tracked by systems designed to monitor compliant assets. Elena's sacrifice created something that no authority can control, free consciousness that remains connected to compassion." As evening fell across the forest, the settlement's enhanced inhabitants gathered for their daily sharing ritual. Through the network, they experienced fragments of each other's growth, small victories over programmed responses, moments of genuine connection between baseline and enhanced consciousness, children learning that their modifications made them different but not less human. David stood before the group, holding a photograph that Martinez had printed for him. Elena in her laboratory, focused and determined, fighting to understand the truth behind his and Marcus's genetics. "She gave us the choice to define ourselves," he said. "Every day we choose to remain connected to our humanity. We prove that enhancement means expanding our capacity to love, not eliminating our reasons to love." Marcus stepped beside his brother, their shared memories of feral childhood now balanced by hope for a future where enhanced and baseline humans could evolve together. "The forest taught us to survive," he said. "Elena taught us to live. Now we teach others that those aren't the same thing." The network hummed with quiet certainty as night settled over the mountains. Elena Vasquez was gone, but her final gift continued spreading, One choice at a time, one connection at a time, one act of love at a time. In choosing to remain human despite their transcendent capabilities, they had become something she could never have imagined but always hoped for, the bridge between what consciousness was and what it could become. Somewhere in the darkness, enhanced children who had never known freedom were beginning to dream of forests and families and futures they could choose for themselves. Elena's revolution was just beginning.